Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Let's get after it.
The TikTok ban bill has been approved unanimously. Both Republicans and Democrats unanimously approved the bill that would ban TikTok from all US phones and tablets if ByteDance doesn't sell the company. If enacted, which it still has to get voted on in both the Congress and the Senate, the bill would give ByteDance 165 days to sell TikTok. TikTok is mounting a push against the bill, serving users with full-screen pop-ups in the app warning that the bill strips 170 million Americans of their constitutional rights to free expression. It also severs multiple millions of people and their livelihoods and jobs and shops that they've started, communities that they've grown, followings that they've had. But it was unanimously agreed upon. Democrats, Republicans, 170 million Americans. They don't care about you. What do you guys think about this? W's in chat if you don't trust the United States government, because I don't.
All right. I've got mixed feelings about this. Of course, I don't trust the United States government. Who does? I never used TikTok before I started this channel. Now I rely on it pretty heavily. I'm on there every day looking for clips and stuff to put in these videos to share with you guys. But I just wanted to address this specific situation here and just say, don't worry. If they shut TikTok down, that does not spell the end for my channel. I will still find a way to source clips.
Atmosphere. Atmosphere? So do you believe that sphere-shaped air is something we experience?
Why don't you explain to me what you perceive it to be?
It's your word. You said atmosphere. What do you think that means?
That is the amount of gases that are held within the Earth by gravity.
Held? Gravity doesn't hold anything. It's not a force. There's no scientific evidence
really?
of gravity.
Really?
Middle of the statement. Middle of the statement. My bad. Obviously, it's me being a dick, wanting to make a false statement, contradicting you. Obviously, that's me being a dick. No, there is no force of gravity. My bad. Still in the middle of the same sentence. Obviously, this is me being a dick. Maybe this is me interrupting you. The gravity's not a force.
What you been doing the whole show?
My bad. That's the fourth attempt. Gravity's not a force to hold gas in a sphere shape. Gravity is the bending of a conceptual medium known as pseudo-Riemannian force space-time derived in the mind's eye of Einstein in mathematics. It's a fourth-dimensional geometry. Meanwhile, in reality, we live in a three-dimensional Euclidean reality. There is no dimension of time to bend. Even if we could bend time as a dimension in a Euclidean four-space geometry, it wouldn't be a container for gas. Gas isn't held by pseudo-Riemannian force-space time bending in an Einsteinian gravitational dimension. Further to that, the notion that gas being held, i.e. gravity is a force, was debunked by Einstein 108 years ago. Mass does not attract mass. That's a Newtonian concept of gas. Pressure being held because of its weight going down towards the center of Earth. That was superseded 108 years ago by Einstein when he developed the fourth-dimensional space-time bending, which is not a force and is definitely not a container to hold gas in a sphere shape. So your oxymoron, sphere-shaped air, is merely a begging the question fallacy to allow you to describe atmospheric conditions as based on an R value, a sphere value, the radius of Earth being the value that derives your refraction rate at 7/6 of the radius in sphere-shaped air. Atmo, air, sphere, a shape. Air doesn't take the shape of a sphere, it takes the shape of its containment. If the gas was in a sky vacuum, we'd have none to breathe. We'd all be dead, because gas fills space. Gravity's not a force. Bending fourth-dimensional space-time doesn't hold it in a container.
All right, I would not be able to have a conversation with that fellow because I feel like he would lose me. But this makes me question, how exactly does our atmosphere stay in place whenever it's backed up against a vacuum? Would it not just dissipate out into space and we would just lose our atmosphere? The idea that gravity is what's holding our atmosphere to the planet doesn't make any sense to me. If there are certain particles in the air and gravity is what's holding those particles to the earth, wouldn't it hold every particle in the atmosphere at the same level, at the same height away from the earth? Because they're all going to have the same density, the same mass, the same weight. So wouldn't they all just be pulled straight down to the ground? How does one particle of air, if it's being kept here by gravity, how does it maintain its situation or its space while another identical particle maintains space at a higher altitude. That doesn't make any sense. Hey, if you're enjoying this video and you'd like to see more, I make a new one just like it every single day. It'd be awesome if you'd hit that subscribe button and come back tomorrow to join me.
First of all, according to the there were walls and walls of hieroglyphics carved in, giving the whole history of who they were and what they were doing and why they were there and where they came from. See, for the people say, well, what's the Egyptians doing at the bottom of the Grand Canyon with all this rapids? How'd they get there? Did they come by ship? Well, that didn't happen to Columbus, right? According to what was there on the wall, they came via a massive tunnel system. And this was the entrance going into the tunnels going back. It documented two things that correspond with the Hopi and Pueblo Indians. The Hopis talk about the ant people and the kivas that they have on their second and third mesa in Arizona, and they came out from these massive tunnel systems after the flood. They were put in there to basically the whole earth was covered with flood water. Okay, that's the Hopi tradition. But the Hopis also have the tradition of part of those underground subterranean chambers. There were big giants that they were never to work with. So there's that giant thread in the cave system. And according to the Hopis that I know, they still exist there. They're just set off. Steve Quill talks about the Kandahar giant that happened in Afghanistan, where the giant came and engaged and killed a couple of our special forces in Afghanistan. That's again shut down, and everything else is quiet about that. Because see, if it happens in Afghanistan and the tunnel system there, it validates what I'm talking about. Here, until the Rosetta Stone was found, they weren't able to interpret those hieroglyphics. But now that the Rosetta Stone, we know how to read the hieroglyphics. It's an amazing story, according to my source in Washington, D.C. The story is this is the descendants of the biblical Joseph of Egypt. Tells the whole story. Lays it out as to how many generations they actually had a civilization there and why they left. It's all, their history is on the walls. And it's definitely history that's not in the history books, and they're not going to talk about it. First of all, it validates the Bible, and they're never going to do that. Okay? Then the next thing, it validates there's a whole antediluvian underground subterranean civilization involving giants. I'm not going to let that out either. Why? Because again, that goes back to Stephen Quill's Empire Under the Ice and the connection to Antarctica and the Anunnaki, the secret society. This is earth-shattering and life-changing when you see that this is much different than what you believe that the world is. So here's all these tunnels that connect to actually the entrance, according to the interpretation. There's under the Sphinx in Egypt is where the tunnel connects, and it goes out throughout much of the world. In fact, it's interconnected tunnels throughout the world. It's connected by ancient technology. Fast-moving, they call them chariots, but they're carts that fast move, so they can travel fast. In fact, you can go again on the north rim of the Grand Canyon, the Kaibab Peninsula, the Kaibab Plateau. The giant ponderosa pines that are on, like around Jacobs Lake and that whole area of northern Arizona, there is ancient workings, vast irrigation networks of an ancient society that was very skilled in bringing water, and there was granaries and everything. There was massive grain production, and that's explained in the walls. They raised grain on that plateau and brought it back for the famine years, validating the biblical story once again. Common people, when they were mummified, they were put into wooden sarcophagi that was carved with wood. Where are they going to get this wood in Egypt? There's no forest to cut. These sarcophagi were carved out of pine, and the pine is ponderosa pine from the north rim of the Grand Canyon. How'd they get it? This explains it.
So this reminds me of a scientific article that I read back in my early 20s, where they were hypothesizing that they could build these tunnel systems, and that with the right angles of the tunnels at a speed of less than 200 miles an hour, that you could get from any location on Earth to any other location on Earth. And their calculations showed that it would take less than 20 minutes. Now, I don't know how accurate that is or if that's since been debunked, but I'm reminded of that, and it makes me think if 200 miles or at less than 200 miles an hour, we could get from any location on Earth to any other location on Earth with a tunnel in 20 minutes. If these tunnels already exist, it would only make sense that they were used to travel from location to location. If you can get somewhere in 20 minutes via shuttle, then walking that distance is probably only going to take you a couple of days. I don't know that I believe that there's all these tunnels and stuff underground that they use to move about like that. It's an interesting theory and would explain how they ended up with all this stuff over here in the United States, but I don't know if I believe that it's true or not.
But he's with Joseph, and they're probably drinking, doing something with coconuts, and the dragon snake appeared. And he said it came right over their house, and this was the first time he could actually see it. He said it was like a metallic sphere.
Oh.
And the entire region was just like halogen white, just lit up like you wouldn't believe. And he said his friend Joseph was like, oh yeah, this happens occasionally. He was fine with it. But Marius said, no, we've got to go up on that mountain and see what the hell is going on. This is ridiculous. So he and Joseph, they plan this trek. As they're planning, he sees this news report hit the local newspapers. Catholic nuns who are native Solomon Islanders who have gone missing. He said all the police investigations into their whereabouts had revealed nothing. They had no leads. These two women had just disappeared. Now, he said it was odd because where they had gone missing was the same place where they had made their first sighting of where the UFO had left the valley. And he said the other strange thing was that the northwest Guadalcanal area was renowned for the dragon snake's reputation for stealing people. Day 3, they finally make it to the mountain range, and he says they caught a glimpse of this waterfall with a lake underneath it. And he thought, surely this is the spot. This is what the tribal chiefs were talking about. And he says it was about half the size of a football field with reeds growing around its edge and a waterfall feeding it from above. And they basically sat there watching it. And it got till 9:45 p.m. They were trying to hide in the bushes, just watching this place. When they finally saw it, they saw the light of this UFO start glowing in the water of the lake. And finally it surfaced, moved to the edge of the lake and just started flying off. They said it headed down towards the mountain range at a 45-degree angle and continued out of sight. And he was like, it's true. They're right. This is where it comes from. And they'd been waiting for about 2 hours for it to return, but they didn't see it return. They saw another light, he claims, come out from under this lake. And suddenly he realized there's 2 of these things. What is going on? They saw what they presume is the first light come back, descend into the water, and they said you could see the glow of the lake until finally it just faded out and things gone. And he starts to think, there's a freaking UFO base down there. There's a UFO base in the Solomon Islands, and I've found it.
And that's why it's shooting at people, because it doesn't want to be found.
Well, when he gets home, he's ecstatic, but then, and it's this huge, it takes him 3 days to get home. And he's so exhausted, he sleeps for 2 days. But eventually it hits him. He starts to realize, who do I tell? Who's going to believe me? This is so crazy. Like, who's going to listen to something so insane? And so he's in this state of almost confusion. He's annoyed. Like, he's made this momentous discovery, but he just knows that nothing can really happen because it's so outlandish. You know, what's he going to do? Go to the Australian news and try and get the story out?
Well, they probably know about it. The authorities probably do at some level.
Finding the UFO base in this lake, his alleged story, is the most reasonable thing that happens in this book. It is the most logical, down-to-earth, mundane event in this entire saga. And the book's over 300 pages. It's here where he totally shifts gear and just starts talking about something completely different. And he says it was during this time, I was living in the northwest of Guadalcanal, having my first UFO experiences, that I first started to learn about the existence of giants on the island.
What I find fascinating about this is the story would indicate that this location that he found is not that difficult to get to. Yeah, you're going to have to do some walking, but with the description of it, I would imagine there's a lot of people out there that know exactly how to get to where he's saying this is located. So somebody could go out there and set cameras up and start filming. Somebody needs to do that. We need that video footage. That would be phenomenal.
So I crawled, dragging that gun under these trees until I got about 20 feet from that orb, 20, maybe 30 feet. And the electricity from it, the buzz, the static, my whole body felt like needles. The hair was standing up and every bump, goosebump on me was just tingling. And the energy was so strong, I couldn't go any closer. I just turned around and I backed away, walked back out of the forest, crawled out. And I got to the pine trees where the fence was crunched. I stood up and I went to step over that fence. And the minute I went to step over that fence, there were two of these beings just appeared right in front of me. They're standing like 3 feet from me, and just enough gap I could walk between them. And immediately I felt this shame come over me. Shame that I had this rifle. Why I brought this to fight something that there ain't no fighting, right? So I took the gun and I tried to hide it behind me. And what they put in my head was what changed me. From that point on, I never hunted again. I don't harm bugs. I have a way with animals now nobody understands. I have 50, 100 ducks. Wild ducks will fly in and fly right up to me. If you come out there, they're gone. But they'll fly right up and eat from me, feed them. Wild mallards. And if anybody knows about mallard ducks, they're one of the most skittish creatures in the world. They fly at thousands of feet high at 80 miles an hour, and you need duck calls and blinds and decoys in the water to get one to land. Well, I have whole flocks of them fly right in and eat. I can feed them. But that wasn't like that before. But these beings told me that they changed me. They told me that the way they put it in my head, when I say told me, they don't really talk. They put images that it's just telepathic, I guess you could say. But it made me understand that the whole world is alive. Everything from the grass to every single animal, bird, tree, all had a consciousness. They even put images into me of the cells in the body, like within the human body. You don't tell your body what to do. Something outside of us is telling our body how to function. The molecules, each cell that divides from one cell to the other has a conscience. So I'm just a part of that. I can't get the words out I want to say, but it just changed me in such a way that I began to cry about everything. I've cried for the last 7, 8, 10 years, I guess, about everything. When I see something get hurt, it just kills me. But it came from that experience with these beings, on how they told me how everything's a living consciousness, and I don't have the right to take its life. That we live in a mutualistic way, like your stomach, for example. You have bacteria in your stomach that digest chlorophyll, plant material. The human can't do it, but this bacteria does. And it secretes the nutrients that you get from that plant. And it survives because you're feeding it the plant material, right? So it's a mutualistic way we live. And it's like a tree gives you wood for a house. It gives you shade for the sun. a nest for a bird, oxygen to breathe, and the list goes on. So everything has a part of life on this planet, and it's not up to us to destroy it and abuse it. And I could talk about this for days.
Wow.
Yeah. It changed me.
That was Chris Bledsoe, unless my memory is serving me incorrectly. He is one of the few in the UFO scene right now that I don't have any serious hard reservations about. He seems like a really genuine person. I don't know that I believe his story there, that he came into actual contact. One thing it makes me wonder about is what, if this did take place, what were these creatures? What were these aliens? What, I guess, what race were they? Because if it's so important to these aliens to enlighten him about how the Earth works and how everything's interconnected and how we shouldn't be harming each other or animals or whatever, then why do we have so many crazy abduction stories of people getting abducted and probed and dropped off, miles away from where they were abducted at with their clothes all missing? And there's just all these crazy stories. It seems like they have no problem harming us, but they don't want us to harm each other. That doesn't make any sense. So I wish he would have went into a little bit more detail about what they look like.
So I like to write about those subjects that I found myself most convincing when I converted and God opened my eyes to becoming a creationist.
All right. Have you heard of the Pacific Plastic Trash Islands?
I think I've seen something about that, but I don't know too much about it. But I think I saw a quick clip on Instagram or something like that, yeah.
Brother, there is an island of trash 3 times bigger than Texas.
Oh.
In the Pacific Ocean. Now follow me, this will help you with your dinosaur.
Gosh, yeah.
Because the way the world is spinning, it makes the northern Pacific swirl one way, the Coriolis effect, and the southern Pacific swirl the other way. In the middle of these big swirls, there is a mountain, an island of trash, 3 times bigger than Texas.
Oh.
I think during the flood, we'd have these swirls all over the place of the dead animals swirling together, and they end up getting buried. They didn't live there, they got buried there. And so I think the reason we've had these massive bone beds is because of the Noah's flood.
The fossil record certainly would support that, Kent, because if you look at the Lance Formation out in Wyoming, it's the same thing. Most of the experts that have studied that location say the dinosaurs were killed elsewhere and then redeposited over here because they're in graded, sorted beds. So you're absolutely right that could be true with a lot of the bone beds around the world.
All right. Well, people want to get go to the movie noahsflood.com. Can they reach you there if they want you to speak at an event or something?
That's something I never really thought about before, but they keep finding all these large deposits of animals that are kind of all mushed together. Almost looks like some natives went on a killing spree and then just piled all the corpses into a pile. That does make sense. If everything was covered in floodwaters, which we know happened, you got all these swirls of water going around just collecting stuff, and whenever the water recedes, it all just dumps it into a pile. That totally makes sense. That's one of those things that when I first heard it, I thought, why have I never thought of this before?
Everything in creation spins and vibrates. Everything has its own prime resonance frequency. Everything. And this is why once we can identify a prime resonance frequency of a bacterium or an atom or whatever it is, or a soccer field, we can then manipulate that object with its prime resonance frequency. In Christianity, it's the Word. In Hinduism, it's Om. The Egyptians believed the universe was sung into creation, and the original people of Australia, not the Aboriginal, so it's the original people of Australia believed that the world was created with 3 sacred songs. And then we have the phenomenal similarities between the 6 days of creation in Christianity and the Word that created everything, the 6 aspects of Om, and the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus, and you start seeing the connections between all these ancient cultures and the creation stories. Sound is the source of all creation. Sound and resonance is responsible for everything. By now you should know that sound manifests physical form, and this is the most basic example. The images of this simoscope images tell us that it was these sounds, the images of the sound, that actually inspired religious symbols. That beautiful cross in a circle at the center of some of these cymatic photographs give us a very clear indication that the creators of the religious symbols knew exactly what they were talking about, that the source of creation is sound itself. And that takes us to what sound does. Sound pretty much does everything you can imagine because it's a source of creation. And this brings us to using sound as a tool in technology. Sound creates light. It's very obvious. We know that God said, let there be light, and you can do this yourself by attaching a speaker to an LED light and see what happens. Royal Raymond Rife, you should know by now, that the man that found the cure for all disease with sound and resonance, and were converted to electric impulses. And sound continues to amaze us. Sound can levitate. By a very quick idea that sound actually does levitate things. Nikola Tesla. He says, if you want to find out the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Everything is sound and magneticism, and this is really important. Sound, moving sound manifests as toroidal fields. Those moving toroidal fields create magnetic fields, which are toroidal fields as well, and moving magnetic fields create electricity. Sound creates magnetic fields. It means everything's be magnetic in some sort. So here's an example.
You might not think of water as being magnetic, but it is, and so are graphite, aluminum, and glass. Aluminum is a good example of a paramagnet.
I didn't realize that everything had a certain degree of magnetism to it. That's pretty interesting. I'm totally convinced that ancient technology was all based around frequency and energy, and around energy, magnetism, and frequency. I think that's how the pyramids were built, using like sound frequency levitation. And it just seems like the possibilities with that type of technology are limitless. And it seems like we're just now discovering like the bare minimum, like the basics of that type of technology. I think it only makes sense that that's what ancient civilizations focused on. Instead of focusing on electronics and stuff like we are in today's society, they were focused on frequencies and magnetism and stuff.
They said they saw this thing come down the night before, flaming, and they thought it was a meteorite. And when the sun came up the next morning, and they got about their business and got up, and somebody looked over and said, they saw all the shiny metal and stuff across the plains there, and they realized it wasn't a meteorite. It may have been an airplane, and that crashed, so they all decided to go over there and see if there was anybody who was alive, that was hurt that needed help. Here comes a military car with a big white star on the side of it, flying over it, and it's full of soldiers. They've got guns, and right behind that was what we call a 4x, which is like a medium-sized Jeep truck situation, and it had two big high whip antennas, all kinds of radio gear in the back, and a guy back there with earphones and stuff on, and he's working these radios, and they all pulled up and stopped. This black soldier, the sergeant, and the reason I know he was a sergeant, my brother told me he was, and he got out of this car, and then a guy got out on the other side, and Glenn said he was a captain. He told me later he was a captain. And this guy had orange-red hair, and all the soldiers then came running over there, pointing guns at people. This creature saw these people, the military. He went nuts. He went into an absolute panic, worse than what he did when he saw us. He just went crazy. And it was like he was looking for a place to run and hide.
But he never got up?
Never got up. He never left the one injured one next to him. And this red-headed officer, this guy was a real butthole. Get away from there, this is a military secret, just screaming and hollering. And he told my uncle and my father that if they didn't want to spend the rest of their life in prison, they would never say anything about what they saw there. If they ever wanted to see us kids again, they'd take the kids away, and they'd never see the kids, meaning me and Victor, that we'd better keep our mouths shut. If we did not, this is what was going to happen. They were threatening people and pushing people, and
the students as well. And Dr.
Oh yeah, they were hustling everybody. And one of the soldiers pushed my uncle. He had a rifle, I guess, and he shoved him back like that. Well, that was something you don't do to my Uncle Ted. Ted had a violent temper, and he grabbed the rifle and reached over top and smacked this guy and dropped him right there. And Ted had dropped, fight had dropped the hat. This guy's a cowboy. He'll hit you in a minute. And of course, when he did that, and there was bolts opened, and Dad grabbed him, you know, pulled him back and got him away. Don't, man, they're going to shoot, don't do that, you know. Then they really started threatening, you know, and they interviewed me.
Well, did the redhead do all the talking pretty much too?
Pretty much, except once in a while the sergeant would chime in and make statements like that to other people in response to the redhead. But mainly it was the redheaded.
Was there a name tag?
Yes, there was, and his name was Armstrong, was right here on his uniform.
Now,
for the protest of this Dr. Buskirk, who said, no, we've got to go the other way. We came from, I don't care where you came from, get your ass up the Arroyo. And now this whole time, no one has ever frisked us down. No one has ever checked our pockets to see if we picked up any of this material. And this girl, Agnes, still has that stuff in her pocket, and some of the other students had stuff. The car up there, there's a Jeep with a guy sitting in the back, and there's a mounted machine gun in the back of this Jeep, and all these soldiers. The Jeep pulls out, we're told to get in the car, we follow the Jeep, and the soldiers go with us all the way back out to the highway. And when we get back out to the highway, they set us right there. They wouldn't let us out of the car, they wouldn't let us move forward. I don't know whether they were making a decision or what. When we got out to the highway, this place was absolutely full of military personnel, military equipment. There was C-47 sitting there, and how we didn't hear that land's beyond me. And how he landed, well, of course, I guess you could land if you're a good pilot out there, because there was no trouble. Ambulances, and there was trucks with wreckers, cranes on them, and there was tankers, like maybe had fuel or water in them. There was just, everywhere you looked, there was military. And
a major recovery operation.
Yeah, it looked like an invasion force. It really did. And they were all wearing these light khaki uniforms. They didn't look like, you know, olive drabs. They were light khaki, and they all had the same patch over there, that kind of blue funny patch with the circles on it was on their shoulder.
I don't know who that guy is, but I believe his story before I believe the story the government gives me. So I just thought that was interesting. That is a supposed eyewitness testimony from the Roswell UFO crash. Never seen it before, never heard that guy's testimony, so I just thought that was interesting and thought you guys would like to see it. I'm going to go ahead and end it there as far as the clips go. I would like to announce that I have a podcast in the works with one of my best friends, and so it's going to be a two-man podcast, going to be focused on this specific type of stuff that I cover on this channel, but we're going to go more in depth and do deep dives on specific things. If that's something you're interested in, that's coming down the pipeline. I will make an announcement whenever we launch the first episode and let you all know that it started. And secondly, I would like to apologize. I know that I didn't have a lot to say for these clips today. I've been a little under the weather, and I'm not sure what's going on with me, but one of the symptoms that I've had has been brain fogginess. It's been pretty severe. It's hard to think, much less say something coherent for the camera. So I apologize if today's video was a little subpar. I do feel like I'm getting better. Maybe tomorrow I'll be back at my regular self and be able to have a little bit more coherent reactions. I'm going to go ahead and end the video there. I hope you guys come back to see me tomorrow. I'll have another video up for you like always. I hope you have a great, safe, fantastic day, and I will see you tomorrow.